A tenured professor thought he could publicly humiliate her with one sharp insult, but in just a few words, she turned the tables, and the internet hasn't stopped talking about it since. The crowd in the University of Cincinnati's packed auditorium murmured with restless energy. A debate was always a spectacle, but tonight, the anticipation was different. The school's most outspoken professor, Dr. Richard Lawson, was about to go head-to-head with Karoline Leavitt, a young conservative voice who had been making waves in political circles. Dr. Lawson, a fixture in the political science department for over 20 years, leaned back in his chair, exuding confidence. He'd debated seasoned politicians, crushed students, and prided himself on dismantling conservative talking points with ease. But this time, it wasn't just another discussion on policy, it was about power. Karoline, on the other hand, sat upright, her expression unreadable. At just 20-something, she had worked in the White House press office and held her own in the political battlefield. The moderator adjusted his glasses. Tonight's discussion will focus on the current political climate, media narratives, and the impact of young voices in shaping America's future. Let's begin. Dr. Lawson wasted no time. I think we can all agree, he began, scanning the audience, that misinformation has been one of the greatest threats to democracy. But what concerns me more is the rise of so-called conservative influencers, young people elevated, because they say what certain groups want to hear. His voice was measured, his words calculated. He didn't look at Karoline directly, not yet. Karoline remained silent, letting him speak. Take, for example, Miss Leavitt. She's built a platform. Yes, but what exactly qualifies her to dictate what's best for the country? A few chuckles rippled through the audience. Karoline leaned forward. Are you asking me a question, Professor, or are you just setting up your punchline? We have to ask, are they a leader, or just playing a role? Then he smiled, that smug, calculated smile, and said it. From where I'm sitting, Miss Leavitt, you didn't get here on merit. You became Trump's puppet. The room went silent. A few gasps, laughs, and exchanged glances between students, unsure whether to cringe or cheer. But Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't turn red or shift in her seat. She just smiled. But what she said next? That's what changed everything. Karoline let the words hang in the air. She exhaled slowly, fingers interlocked. Then, with calm demeanor, she tilted her head slightly. If standing for the values I believe in makes me a puppet, then what does blindly attacking those with different views make you? The room murmured. Dr. Lawson's smirk faltered. She leaned in, voice sharp. You preach independent thought, but the moment someone challenges you, it's not critical thinking, it's blind loyalty. The professor shifted. Karoline pressed on. This isn't about me, it's about control. People like you are fine with young women speaking up, as long as they say the right things. Lawson chuckled, dismissing her. Karoline didn't blink. Nothing says intellectual discourse like calling someone a puppet. Silence. His smirk was gone. Dr. Lawson shifted again, adjusting his microphone, his usual confidence replaced with something different. Karoline wasn't angry or flustered, and that was the problem for him. She had flipped the exchange. The moment hung in the air like static. The audience, once amused by Lawson's jab, now found themselves at a crossroads. Karoline didn't need to add anything. Her words had landed. Before the moderator could intervene, a voice cut through the tension. She's got a point. Heads turned. A student in a hoodie, arms crossed, leaned back. Then, another voice, hesitant but firm. If this was the other way around, people would be furious. Lawson's fingers twitched, but he kept his composure. Karoline hadn't crumbled. The moderator tried to smooth things over, but the momentum had shifted. Professor, you always tell us to challenge ideas, but you didn't challenge hers, a student said. Lawson chuckled, but it lacked humor. Let's not pretend this is a grand conspiracy. Karoline raised an eyebrow. You call it an observation. I call it an excuse to avoid having a discussion. A low hoof echoed in the room. Lawson's patience thinned. You're free to say whatever you like, but expect pushback. Karoline smiled. Pushback is one thing. Insults are another. Before she could respond, another student spoke up. If a conservative professor called a liberal student a puppet, this place would be on fire. The room shifted. Lawson clenched his jaw, realizing he was losing control. The moderator stepped in. Let's pause before moving on to the next topic, but it was too late. By morning, the clip was everywhere. The internet had already picked sides. The 3-minute moment where Dr. Lawson called Karoline a puppet. Her razor-sharp response went viral. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Someone even uploaded it to YouTube titled, Liberal Professor Tries to Humiliate Karoline Leavitt. It backfires spectacularly. Within hours, it had hundreds of thousands of views. Conservative commentators jumped on it, calling it another example of academia's hostility toward dissent. They praised Karoline for staying composed under pressure, refusing to let someone with more authority reduce her to a caricature. But the reaction wasn't just from the right. Some students shared stories of professors shutting down uncomfortable discussions. mocking dissenting views and claiming to champion free speech only if it was on their terms. The viral moment became something bigger, and Dr. Lawson wasn't handling it well. He saw the clip in his office that morning. At first, he scoffed, thinking it would pass. But then the emails started coming in, not from strangers, but colleagues keeping their distance. The administration sent a message about avoiding inflammatory remarks, and students, once friendly, began avoiding him. Karoline hadn't said a word since. The clip spoke for itself. Dr. Lawson had always thought himself untouchable until now. The headlines came fast. University professor under fire for calling conservative speaker Trump's puppet. It wasn't just a bad day, it was a PR disaster. Emails flooded in, some supportive, some scathing. The university had called him in for a meeting on professionalism. Even faculty members who usually agreed with him didn't defend him. And worst of all, his students were questioning him, and some were afraid to speak up. For the first time in his career, Dr. Lawson felt something unfair. While he was dismissed and mocked, Karoline wasn't just watching the fallout, she was navigating her own. Despite overwhelming support, there was backlash. Anonymous threats and accusations that she staged the moment for political clout, but she didn't have to defend herself. The facts were on her side. She hadn't come to fight, only to refuse being belittled. And the world noticed. The following evening, Dr. Lawson was trending on Twitter, not just in academic circles, but in mainstream news. The petition had escalated the situation, transforming the viral clip into a national conversation about free speech, academic bias, and power dynamics between professors and students. That night, Lawson sat alone in his office, scrolling through headlines. He felt a surge of frustration. For years he had controlled the room, always with the last word. Now he was being analyzed, dissected. Meanwhile, Karoline didn't even respond to media requests. Her silence was more powerful than any statement. On campus, the energy shifted. Karoline wasn't just the girl from the debate anymore. Some who disagreed with her politics respected how she handled herself. Then came the email from the university, a meeting about classroom conduct and faculty standards. Lawson's stomach tightened. "Then I suggest you start updating your CV," the dean said, breaking the silence. Lawson froze. "If you refuse to cooperate, we can't guarantee your position here will remain secure." Her voice was calm, but firm. The institution always wins. The weight of her words hit him like a punch. Years of loyalty, prestige, tenure, all of it now at risk because of one viral moment. And Karoline wasn't the one pushing him out. He had done it to himself. Meanwhile, Karoline's world was shifting in the opposite direction. After the debate, her phone was flooded with messages and media requests. But she didn't rush to speak. Instead, she took a step back, choosing not to be another headline that flared up and burned out. Then came an invitation from a conservative think tank to speak about free speech on college campuses. At first, she hesitated, but the support from students who respected how she handled herself made her realize this wasn't just about politics. She said yes. When the event arrived, the auditorium was packed. Karoline didn't gloat about the debate. Instead, she spoke about the importance of real debate and preserving free speech. Karoline finished her speech with a powerful message about listening to each other, even when it's uncomfortable, and refusing to be silenced. By the end, she had proven that she wasn't just the girl who clapped back, she was a voice worth listening to. Meanwhile, Dr. Lawson was about to learn a hard lesson. He stood before his lecture hall for the last time. No apology, no public statement. The university hadn't fired him outright, but his time was up. His courses had been reassigned, his email flooded with complaints and defenses. And his students, once his allies, now questioned his integrity. Instead of reflecting on his mistakes and repairing his reputation, Lawson ended his final lecture with bitterness, dismissing the room with a remark about echo chambers. Karoline, on the other hand, was preparing for something greater. She launched an initiative aimed at fostering real, honest debate without fear of being silenced or labeled. Universities, once dismissive of conservative students, now had to pay attention. She had done what Lawson couldn't. She turned debate into action. It was never about winning. It was about proving that ideas, not insults, shape the future. What happened that night wasn't just about one debate or viral clip. It was about what happens when people stop listening, when intellectuals become gatekeepers, and when students feel silenced. No one has a monopoly on the conversation. Karoline earned her voice. Now the question is, will you? So, what do you think about Karoline Leavitt's stance in the debate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to see more bold and meaningful discussions like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to share it with your friends. Let's get the conversation going.